Hello and a very warm welcome to all. You're watching Hindustan Times and my name is Aisha Varma. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has committed to pursuing an EU-wide ban on social media use for children after an expert panel recommended restricting access for those under 13. For more on this, let's cross over to Thomas Sparrow, correspondent with our partners DW in Berlin. Welcome, Thomas. How exactly is this proposal being received in Europe, both politically and among the public?
There does seem to be momentum here in Europe for these kinds of proposals, and in fact several individual members of the European Union have already moved forward with proposals at a national level. The European Commission says in fact that there's a window of opportunity when it comes to now discussing something that would not be based on every single individual country, but rules that would apply to the whole of the European Union. There seems to be momentum because there is an understanding among experts that social media platforms have the potential to impact the well-being and the mental health of teenagers in a negative way. There seems to be momentum as well because an understanding that these platforms must provide a safe environment for teenagers to actually use them. If there isn't a ban in place, in that case, obviously, teenagers would not use them in the first place. The European Commission has basically compared that to car manufacturers that are required by law to produce cars that are actually safe by design. In other words, users, drivers are not expected to bring their own seatbelt, they're not expected to bring their own airbags. The cars have to be produced in a safe way by design. And that is something that they want to extrapolate, that they want to also make sure that it happens in the social media sphere, that these big companies, these big tech companies actually produce social media platforms that are safe by design. And that's why now there's this whole big discussion here in Europe, in other parts of the world as well, about what needs to be done that when users actually go onto these social media platforms, that they can do it in a safe way. Specifically, we're talking now obviously about teenagers.
How likely is it that the Commission can turn this into an EU-wide rule, given that child safety measures are now handled unevenly across member states?
So there are some in Europe that say that it's important that national countries, France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, others, have actually taken the lead and have also proposed measures at a national level. But these measures, as you can imagine, are mixed. They're not always the same in Germany compared to France or compared to Portugal or compared to Poland. Each country there has presented specific proposals and is more or less advanced. And this has one very important problem, namely the fact that these proposals would be very difficult to implement in a practical level. Just imagine a teenager that is using TikTok or that is using Instagram, and he or she is using that in France, where there would be a ban in place, and then moves to Germany, where it's a bit more skeptical, the view on a specific social media ban, or then go to Poland or to the Baltic states that see the issue very differently. It would be a very difficult thing to enforce. And that's why there's an interest, specifically now, and that's something that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also stressed, an interest in having EU-wide regulation on this. Basically, a regulation that would apply to all 27 members of the European Union. It may sound good, but it's also something difficult to implement, because if every country has different views on this, if every country has different priorities when it comes to what teenagers can or cannot do online, then it will be very difficult to find consensus. Those who see it positively say it's actually something that needs to happen. Those who view it in a skeptical way say that ultimately what could happen at an EU-wide level is that countries then have a minimum consensus, which ultimately is not enough to make sure that children and teenagers are protected online.
How have the major social media platforms reacted to this debate about bans in Europe?
Well, as you can imagine, they are not in favor of bans. On the one hand, that would affect the number of users that enter these social media platforms. They also believe, and they have believed that for a long time, that they are indeed putting safeguarding measures in place, that they do have elements in their own social media design that can help to verify the age of users, that can help to keep children and teenagers protected, and that can actually lead to a safe environment online. But this is something that experts, officials at a European level, by the way, also officials at a national level here in Europe, do not necessarily agree with. That's why there is such a debate in Europe. That's why there is such a debate in other parts of the world regarding what needs to be done beyond what is already in place by the social media platforms. And there's the idea, there's the necessity coming from Europe that it has to be regulated. And there's a big discussion here as to what that essentially would mean. From a European perspective, this would not be the first time that they actually tackle what they believe, what the European Union believes, is a dangerous algorithm and a dangerous design by the social media platform. In fact, the European Commission has criticized Meta for its algorithm. It has criticized TikTok for its algorithms, considering that those algorithms are harmful and can negatively affect the well-being and the mental health of users. The social media platforms are also required under a very important law here in Europe called the Digital Services Act to protect users online. But the momentum now is to have a specific rule, a specific set of regulations designed to make sure that teenagers and young adults are protected online. And that's why you have this momentum. That's why you have all these discussions underway. What comes next is for the European Commission to present these proposals for regulation at a European-wide level, for the different member countries to discuss and decide on ultimately what's at stake. And that's something that European member states have stressed time and time again, is the mental health and the well-being of children and teenagers online.
All right, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us.